Are you a born Muslim but not practicing Islam? Are you thinking about getting back into Islam? Listen to Nawal's story of how she did this, so you can do it too. This is the easiest way to find out about the secrets of getting back into Islam, so you can reconnect with God. Nawal was born Muslim, her father is Muslim, and her mother is agnostic. At the age of around 15, Nawal left Islam. Join Nawal on her journey as she explains how she accepted Islam. She tells us about her struggles after accepting Islam and how they made her a stronger Muslim. Nawal is 29 years old and lives in Montenegro. She has studied Islamic sciences and Quran in Syria. She is also a health specialist. Welcome to the show, Nawal.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming on to the show. Okay, so as I mentioned in the introduction, Nawal comes from a Muslim family, but there was a time where she left Islam and then came back to Islam. So Nawal, before we get into your story about how that happened, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am, my name is Nawal. I am American. I currently live in Montenegro, and I'm a health specialist by profession. Right now I'm 29 years old, and I had, I had a lot of different things that I was kind of figuring out pertaining to my faith, but 12 years ago I accepted Islam again.
Okay, so your story would be interesting for someone in the same situation where they grew up with a Muslim family, Muslim parents, but they weren't really practicing the religion, and then later on in their life they came back to it. So maybe could you tell us why you decided to leave Islam?
Yeah, so I think my father specifically had a very traditional view of Islam where, he was practicing. I mean, he did pray, he did, read Quran. I know there's some families out there where the parents are, really traditional, where they don't want their daughters leaving the house and things like that, but the parents, you don't see them practicing in any way, shape, or form. And that was not my situation at all. My father was praying, he was reading Quran, he was, like attending halaqas and stuff. But the main issue that I really had with him was that he, like Islam, in his eyes was really just a set of rules, and you just have to do this, you have to do that. And it wasn't really about finding something deeper and connecting to the heart. So I still have memories of him telling me, if you don't pray, you're going to go to hell, and just, trying to instill that fear, but not really explaining to me how prayer is actually beneficial for me. And it's, that I really need to feel connected to it. And I think that was the main reason why I left at one point in my life, because when I started having questions and I started questioning a lot of things, I found, at least from his specific community, a lot of resistance of like, why are you asking this? You shouldn't be asking. Only Allah has this, knowledge. And it really turned me off. And that's pretty much why I ended up leaving in the end.
And at what age was that when you decided to leave Islam?
I started questioning pretty much around 15 and really feeling like I'm ready to move on to something else. And towards the end of, 15, I pretty much was convinced I didn't want to be Muslim anymore.
Okay, and did your belief in God change?
No, I don't think I ever felt like God didn't exist. I think I just felt like, if I could just be a good human being who cares about other people, then I don't need to pray or fast or do any of these things.
Okay, and then so at that time when you were 15, did you start looking for other religions, or you just felt like living your life?
So, alhamdulillah, at that time, I actually was part of another community in Chicago, which I had joined on my own. This community, they were actually running a weekly halaqa program, but it was a very specific program where, you were assigned to two teachers and you were with those teachers for a couple of years, like 8 to 10 years. And I was in this group, and it was eight girls with two teachers, and we were attending on a weekly basis. But their kind of goal was very different, and than what for example, my questioning was all about, and they really couldn't. Their whole thing was that we should have a safe zone for girls who can come and learn about some things relating to Islam, but obviously the teachers who were, kind of, or, leading the group, they weren't, scholars or anything. So, they were very honest that, like, I can't answer this question for you. You need to talk to a sheikh about this. And so I was consistently a part of that. And I was a part of it because even when I decided I didn't want to be Muslim anymore, I still knew that I wanted to be around people who held up a certain kind of lifestyle. Because even when I left Islam, I was never interested in drinking. I was never really that interested in, like partying or certain things like that. And I knew that the quality of the girls that I was with was something really hard to find. And I knew that I needed to stay persistent in my search. So, leaving that group would have been really awful for me because it would have kind of put a dent in my journey of having any stability or any type of good influence. So I stayed with them even when I left Islam.
Okay. So it seems to me that you sort of still had feelings for Islam at that time.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I was also studying other religions. It wasn't like I was ready to. I mean, I left Islam, but I wasn't, thinking to myself, well, I don't want to be any religion at all. I kind of, in the beginning, I was like that, where I was like, oh, I don't really want any religion at all. And then I remember feeling quite empty and feeling like I needed some structure. So I started searching. I took like a biblical studies class. I studied Judaism, and they did appeal to me. Like, I will say that they really appealed to me. But, you know, Allah chose what He chose for me, and I ended up traveling and ended up having a really, spiritual, deeply, intense spiritual experience, and that kind of opened my eyes towards Islam.
Okay. So before we get into that trip that you're talking about, where you had the spiritual experience, I just want to focus back again where you decided to leave Islam. And
Mhm.
was it mainly, you talked about your father and his attitude. Was it mainly because of your father, or was it more that you couldn't understand the religion the way that you had
Honestly,
learnt it?
well, so I had gone to Islamic, like, Islamic school for many years. I had, even after school, for the beginning of, when I was in elementary school, my father was sending me to a Quran teacher for many, many, many years. And I think his goal was really about not having me be influenced by my mother. And my mother, her family, they're not Americans by origin, and they were but they were pretty secular, and they always were really open. And I still have memories of going to my grandfather's house, and he never had a problem with alcohol. He never had a problem with anything in the house. It was just normal for him because his daughters went to school. I mean, half of them went to school in America, and he had already accepted that lifestyle even before he came to America. Um, so, I was really, my parents were, when they were married, they had a lot of issues because they couldn't really agree on things. They had very different visions. And I would say they were both extreme, because I also felt very put off by being agnostic or being, well, atheist, let's say, because my mother was also quite, pushy about that. Like, why do you have to dress like this? Why do you have to, do these things? And she was very, very against it. And my father, on the other hand, was really pushing for it. So I think it was, you know, I was basically seeing the bad of both worlds consistently. And after they got divorced, I actually moved in with an uncle of mine, because there was a lot of family issues basically, and I was living with them pretty much after my parents got divorced, since they had basically adopted us. And I was seeing a positive image of Islam when I was living in their home. My uncle was a really, kind and very gentle person, and his wife also came from a very traditional family, so she didn't know anything about Islam at all. She thought Islam was a woman cooking, cleaning, having children, and that's it. And he was really I would say, very progressive in a way, for the community that he came from. So he was really open to talking to her about things, giving her choice, and really opening the doors to understanding. But the one thing that I really struggled with, even in their home, was that, they were a lot older. They were in their 60s when I was living with them, and they couldn't answer some of the questions that I had pertaining to my generation, because they had never dealt with that. So, my uncle was really gentle towards me. He never, like, even if I had ever decided in my life, which at that time, let's say, if I said to him, hey, I want to go out to party, he would have never said no. I never did, but, he wouldn't have ever said no, because he really believed in choice. But it wasn't enough, because it felt like they were doing it because it became habitual for them, and they were really just practicing based on habit, and also because they're very simple people, and they felt really connected to it. But I couldn't connect to the religion the way they could, because different people have different needs. So for them, they wanted a simple understanding of God, and just morality on a day-to-day basis, whereas I think I had much deeper questions. So it was a really different kind of attraction to the religion that they had. But yes, the main reason was mostly because of my father, that I was really against Islam, and because of my mother, that I was against atheism.
Okay. Yeah, and I was going to ask now about your mother. You mentioned she's agnostic, but then you also say she's an atheist.
Well, she started, she was agnostic, and she was, pretty much telling me, I don't know if there's God, I don't know if he exists or not, but it was kind of borderlining atheism, let's say, because she wasn't really practicing anything. She, and she was really, really unsure about God. So, I mean, it is agnosticism, but I mean, still, it was the way that the approach was that, um, you shouldn't be like this. You shouldn't be practicing. There's nothing to, there's no one to to pray to, or something like that. It was in her own, let's say, it sounds strange, but it was just kind of like she was putting it on me, where it was more about like atheism, but for herself, I could just tell that she was questioning, and she was really unsure. And I think it wasn't even atheism as much as it was just her being anti-religious, and not liking religion as a whole.
Yeah, so this all happened around the age of 15 when you left Islam, and then you mentioned earlier about this trip you took when you had a spiritual experience, and this happened at the age of 17. So it seems to me like these events are happening very quickly for you in your life.
Yes. Yeah, so I had graduated high school, and I had this opportunity to travel for a year and study foreign language overseas. So I left, and within the first week that I was in Syria, I got extremely ill. I mean, really extremely ill. And towards the, I was kind of in the house, just laying in bed for a week. And I was living in a dormitory with a bunch of other sisters who were, so this university, it was a language university, but they also had an Islamic studies department. So most of the girls who were there, they were there to do like a master's or doctorate in Islamic studies. And I had just came for a year to study language and leave.
So why
And
did you
basically,
choose Syria?
Uh, to be honest with you, because of the safety, but also because of the expense of living there. Because, at that time there was, I think it was called Qasid Institute, which was in Jordan for language, and there was a couple in Egypt, but the problem was always, with Jordan it was the cost, and with Egypt it was the safety issue.
Okay, that you had no intentions of getting back to Islam, or you were sort of thinking about it?
No, not really. I didn't really have any idea of wanting to be Muslim again. And it was kind of a strange experience even when I came, because, I just still remember like the first 2, 3 days when I was, when I had just arrived, the girls were telling me, oh, we should pray together and this and that. And I didn't have the heart to tell them, listen, I'm not Muslim and I don't really, pray or anything. But kind of out of, this tension of, not wanting to really express to them what was really going on with me, and then having them say, hey, but you should be Muslim and this and that, I just, was like, oh, like I already prayed, or, like I'll pray on my own or whatever it is. And then eventually, as I told you, I got sick pretty much right away, like on like the fourth or fifth day, I remember. And once I got sick, I was in bed for a week and I was just vomiting. Like, I had just, all these things happening with me, and I had like a really high fever. And for that pretty much week, all the girls in that dormitory were trying to take care of me. And it was a really humbling experience, because I remember amongst themselves, they had come up with a system of like shifts where they were just coming, and, one person was staying up all night with me and just putting cold water on my head and trying to keep the fever down. And I just was really astonished that these people that I didn't even know were doing all of this for me. So after that point, eventually they took me to the hospital, and the doctor had said, listen, we're going to have to hospitalize her because her fever is too high, and, she's really dehydrated because she's vomiting all the time. And, also, because I had very severe bowel issues as well. And they just said, listen, we just have to hospitalize her. There's no other choice. And at that point, they said, okay, well, what do we want to do? And they said, okay, take her back home for another day. And if she's not good by tomorrow, we're going to hospitalize her, and that's it. So they gave me some really strong medication, and I went back home. And I just remember that, I was pretty much asleep for 22 hours a day, because it was just so painful to be awake, and my fever was just too high. So basically what ended up happening was, I just remember that there was a day that I woke up in the evening, and they tried to feed me and tried to get me to take medicine. And at one point, so I ate everything, and then, or tried to eat everything, and then I went to sleep. And then around Fajr time, so in Syria, there's a tradition that before Fajr, they do this dhikr on the loudspeaker, and you can hear it through the whole city of Damascus. And it's not just in Damascus, it's pretty much in every city. So they do this dhikr like right before Fajr, and it's during the time of I'm trying to remember, tahajjud.
If anyone's confused, Fajr, she's talking about the prayer in the morning, and tahajjud is some prayers that you do at the night time. And the dhikr is like some prayers that are said over the loudspeakers across the whole city.
Yeah, and it was really, I mean, I had never experienced that in any country before, but they were doing this dhikr in the morning, and I just remember um, waking up and hearing it, and then all of a sudden, heard the adhan for prayer, and I felt like in a couple of hours, everyone's gonna wake up and they're gonna take me to the hospital, and I really don't want this to happen. I really don't want to be hospitalized. And I was really afraid because I had just been sick for so long. And I was in a foreign country and I didn't really know anyone. And then they were telling me this is what's about to happen. And while the Fajr Adhan was going off, I just prayed like from my heart. And I just said, Allah, I know I know that you exist. I believe in you, but I'm just really not sure like what, how to be, which direction to go in basically in life. And I'm seeing that you brought me to this place, you put me in this setting with all these people who are very committed to you. And it's making me wonder if this is what you want for me. So if this is what you want for me, I ask please to make me better, and I promise that I will, accept Islam and come back to this faith and be very committed to you. And right after I made that dua or this prayer, I basically went to sleep. And at 9 o'clock, I remember I woke up and they were trying to check my temperature and see if I needed to, if my temperature had gone down or anything, and if I needed to be taken to the hospital. And I just remember I woke up and it was like I was never sick. I had no vomiting, no fever, no symptoms at all whatsoever. And everyone was just astonished that this even happened. Yeah, I mean, it was a really amazing experience to have yourself, be sick for so long, and then all of a sudden, you make dua to Allah and you're okay. So that was basically the reason why I had accepted in the end, and I just made the decision that this is, what Allah really wants for me.
That's great. And you were still very young at this time, still only 17.
Yeah, I was still really young.
Okay. And so was it a hard road after that to continue practicing Islam, or was it just, something you just started doing straight away and very easy?
Well, in the beginning, there was a lot of the usual excitement, like, I'm a part of something now and I have to be this really committed, devoted person. And, alhamdulillah, I was in the presence of very good teachers and people. So I didn't have, I mean, I had a lot of access to people that I could ask questions, and people who could offer me some knowledge. And I ended up actually extending that year to 2 more years. And I ended up going to the University of Dawa there. So, it was really exciting, of course, in the beginning, just feeling like, okay, I'm a whole person. I know what I want. I know where my life is headed, and I have a clear direction. But like all things, that picture starts to crumble after a while if you're stagnant for too long. And that's pretty much what started happening after a certain point. And I was starting to feel like I have all of these questions, and it just kind of brought me back to, square one. The thing was with my upbringing, I think I felt more hostility towards um, Islam because of my father. Even though, as I told you, I did have another kind of perspective that I was also getting to see it from my uncle and with some of my friends. But also, it just seemed like there was still something really missing. And I think when I came to Syria and I found that there was a lot of emphasis on spirituality and on understanding Islam, it was really refreshing and it felt very comforting. But the thing is that in Syria, as much as mashallah many people are very knowledgeable and there is a lot being offered there, but at the same time there was the other issue of a kind of culture clash. And I think I never felt fully American growing up, but somehow when I was there, I did feel, as an American, that there is some kind of difference, let's say. It didn't feel so strong in the beginning. It felt very normal. And, for example, when I was there, I became Shafi'i, even though my father was Hanafi, and I was following a lot of the things that were basically just one opinion out of several from many scholars about how you should pray or how you should dress or how you should do certain things. And I did get kind of caught up in that. So I then the war happened and I ended up leaving due to the war. And I moved to Turkey for a year. And in Turkey, I wasn't studying. I was just living there and working and hoping that, Syria would open up again so that I could go back and continue my studies, but it never happened. So I ended up staying in Turkey for a year, and then eventually I was married. And I ended up moving to my husband's country. He was from Lebanon, and we were living there together for 2 years. And that's when I had a different perspective of Islam being presented to me when I went there.
Okay, and is that where you did most of your study of Islam and Quran? Was that in Lebanon?
No, it was mostly in Syria for 3 years. For 3 years in Syria. In Turkey, I joined a school for a very short period of time, like 5 months. And in between the time of me moving to Turkey and leaving Syria, I had also lived in Tunisia for a short period of time and in Egypt as well, but I never studied there. I never had that experience. After I moved to Lebanon, I got married and I moved there for 2 years, and my in-laws were actually, my father-in-law specifically, his family, they were Christians who had converted to Islam. And in Lebanon, that's quite a big deal, let's say. So, his family and my mother-in-law's family, they were quite secular before, in their youth, let's say, because it was right after, it was still during the time when there was effects of colonialism and Arabs in that region had really lost their identity. So they grew up quite secular, but mashallah, they were always very, moral people. They always believed in God, even if they didn't practice. And with time, they became religious, but even after they became religious, they were still quite simple in their knowledge. They were quite simple in their practice as well of just, praying 5 times a day and reading Quran, but they didn't have the accessibility to have scholars in their presence or study with people of higher knowledge. And I think that was also another experience that really helped me to understand that different people really need different things, and I really needed something more. And I had my stage in Syria, and that I was having my stage that time, and I needed to keep looking. Thankfully, my husband at that time was quite open, and he, really facilitated this kind of pathway to questioning and understanding more. And he was never, offended by me questioning or having doubts or anything. And he himself was always, kind of looking and searching as well, to understand certain things about Islam. Finally, we had moved to the States, and we ended up getting divorced. And I think for me, the biggest, awakening that I did have was when I got divorced. because it really led me to question so much about, Islam and my life. And I really did feel like, I did everything right. I never, did anything that Allah was upset with, or, I always tried to be the best person that I could be. And somehow I had this awful experience. And there was a lot of other issues as well that I had with my family growing up. And I was really trying to mend that for many, many years with, there was issues of abuse and things like that as well. So there was a lot of things, and I think it really meant a lot to me that if I was going to be Muslim, I really needed to feel that peace of mind as well, because going to, Islamic studies school or university and learning all these things from a textbook perspective, it was great and it's really important, but it also didn't fulfill the anger and frustration I had for many, many years towards religion and just towards, Allah, I should say specifically. It was more towards Allah and just why all these things had happened, that even when I changed my life, it was still kind of happening. And what I can say is that, I find that many people, the biggest thing that they really struggle with is why is there good and why is there bad? And if God is there, then, why are all these horrible things happening to me? And from my own, understanding of life, when I really accepted that those bad things happened, but I didn't have to let them define me, and that there was some knowledge and something that came out of those events, it really gave me a lot of peace of mind. It took a long time, as I mentioned, I'm 29, so I've only recently accepted a lot of these things, but it really did take, it really did bring a lot of peace of mind. And what I can say is that, without, getting into this very long explanation of all these events and things that had happened and all of these, awakenings that had happened, is that what I realized with being any religion and accepting any religion is that, number one, you do have to feel it in your heart. You have to feel that it's really something for you when you first accept it. The second thing I would say is that every spiritual journey, it's consistent work. You have to consistently keep searching, keep looking, and that you're going to have stages. You're going to have a stage where you feel very convinced, and then you're going to have a stage where you feel like everything's falling apart, but you have to keep pushing. And just to end this, with, some words of wisdom that a sheikh gave me, was that, he said that the amazing thing about the story of Surah Al-Kahf, about the men who go to the cave, is that there was four, I think he said 3 or 4 elements that they showed, which applies to every person who's looking for Allah or God generally. Is that, number one, you have to have faith, and they had faith when no one else had faith. Number 2 is that you're going to go through hardship. So they ran away and they had to stay in the cave, and they had to go through a lot of hardship, leaving that community and, struggling to stay, keep their faith. And he said that's a part of it. He said the third thing is knowledge, like you have to seek knowledge. And the fourth thing he said is you have to have persistence. He said that, and he just continued and said, the problem is that many people, they have knowledge, but they have no faith, or they don't have any inner, feeling. And he said that's wrong, because, you need both. And other people, they have that spiritual feeling, but they don't have the knowledge. And then, along with that, there's the third type of people who they have the knowledge and the faith, but then they reach a stage where they're just like, I don't know if I'm convinced anymore. And then they lack the persistence to keep going. Alhamdulillah, I was really blessed because I never gave up on God. I consistently was, asking all the time, even when I had moments of doubt and I felt like that I'm leaving, like I'm never gonna be a part of this religion again. I was right the first time when I left and I should just leave it now again. I still pushed on because I felt like it was a promise I made to Allah, and I'm really lucky that I made that promise to Allah, because that's what really, during times of hardship, kept me going. And I kept saying to myself, but you made a promise and you have to stick with it. And I just asked Allah, like, listen, I have this issue that I'm really struggling with. I don't understand why you're asking me to do this, or why Islam, talks about, this issue or that issue in this way. Please show me. And sometimes, the answer took years. That's the reality. And I kept reading and searching. And sometimes I found the answer through just reading and searching. And other times it just took an event to happen that somehow it just clicked with my heart. So I do have to say that, it's really important to be persistent. And that's just a part of faith, is being persistent.
Thanks for that, Nawal. And also, I want to get your advice for anyone out there, the ones that they grew up in a Muslim family with Muslim parents, but now they're thinking about coming back to Islam and practicing Islam. So with that sort of person in mind, could you give advice on, what sort of steps that they should take to try and come back to the religion?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is please do your own research, because Islam is very vast, there's no one opinion. And I think, with a lot of the families that we're dealing with, they have this one opinion, like Islam says this and that's it. And that's not true. The Prophet ﷺ was always very flexible and very accommodating to people based on what culture they came from. And that's natural. You can't expect someone who lived in, Siberia to all of a sudden, adhere to Arab culture. That's not the way it works. You have to find a way to integrate Islam into your culture and connect it to you. And that's really important, because your culture is your identity, as is your religion. So you have to find this gateway where you can find both of them and have that peace. Second thing
just
is,
on that, before we move on to the second one, I want to add in there that this was something that I had to go through as well when I converted, was that, I had to learn that Islam was very flexible, and it wasn't just one way, black and white, this is the way. And for people who are, coming to Islam, this can be something that's, very hard to understand at the start. And so I think that's a good piece of advice.
And I think it's also important, though, to understand the other end as well, which is that, people who do have this kind of mentality of just, this is the way I want to do it and that's it, and this is the way I believe it should be, you have to also respect that, because, I've met a lot of people who are like that. For example, my uncle, where he wouldn't, accept something new. But, I really respect that, because that's his, peace of heart, like his heart at peace, and he really needed that, to be a good person and to be connected to Allah. So you shouldn't also try to shatter other people's understanding of Islam, because the reality is that everyone is going to have a different connection with Allah. Some people, like I wear hijab, but I know people who don't wear hijab, and I understand that the gaps that they have in for example, hijab, maybe they don't have in other things that I have gaps in. And I think it's really important to understand that everyone is going through their own journey, and instead of looking at others being like, oh, she doesn't do this or he doesn't do that, I think the focus should be on yourself. And just to, even people who say, oh, we should pray for her, like, yes, you should be praying for everyone, but don't pray for them specifically because you have pity on them. Because the reality is that they're all looking for the same thing that you're looking for, and you have to just step back and focus on yourself. So that would be my first, piece of advice, that, don't, if you have a different opinion from someone else, you have to respect that within yourself, that Allah is your guide, and that, you're going through your own journey, and it's okay to have a different opinion based on cultural certain preferences, and also due to your own personality. And it's also important to understand not to tell someone else that they're wrong, they're also doing what they think is best for them and what they think is the truth from Allah. Along with that, I will say seek out knowledge, really seek out knowledge, go to knowledgeable people. And the third, the third and fourth most important things are, third is find teachers, really find good teachers. And, I have kind of a system of how I find a teacher, which is that I ask them something really kind of out of their comfort zone, and I see what their reaction is. And I found that some of the best teachers that I ever had were the ones who accepted those things that were out of their comfort zone and just said to me, either listen, like, I don't know how to answer that question, I don't have that knowledge, or people who just said to me, this is the opinion that I have and this is what I understand from an Islamic perspective, but you should really find out for yourself, because that really shows a sense of humbleness and a faith in Allah being, at the end of the day, the one who's going to guide me. Whereas when I met up with sheikhs who were just like, no, this is the way it is, you're wrong, or why did you even think of that, or why did you even question me about this? This is like a horrible question to ask. I found that these people, as much as maybe they went to, universities and madrasas and everything, but that they lacked a humbleness. And I just couldn't learn from people like that. So, I will say that I'm definitely a fighter in some way, and I don't really take advice from people. But I found when I was with more humble teachers, I was more open to taking their advice as well, because I knew it came from a place of goodness and real humbleness and connection. And I think, in these days, it's really hard to find teachers who are really guiding their students through the guidance of Allah. And that's something really important to have. The fourth thing that I will say is that please be persistent, really be persistent. Persistent in seeking out knowledge, but also persistence in dua, and when you have those weak moments, you have to really just pray. And sometimes, we also need a break, because I found that some questions I had, I kept searching, and it just drove me crazy and made me angry and frustrated. And I just, in the end, said, listen, I'm not gonna get all worked up and angry about this. I just need to let it go for a little bit. Just the way, sometimes when you're looking for something in the house and you're like, I know I put it here, and you keep searching and you just can't find it. It drives you crazy. And then all of a sudden, one day you open up the pocket of your jacket and you find it. I mean, I believe it's the same sometimes with knowledge. Sometimes you just have to let it go. And you just have to be like, okay, I'm not going to care about this for a while. And I've made my dua, I've done the research, I couldn't find an answer that really helped me to understand this. And then it'll just come on its own. So, there has to be this persistence, but there also has to be a balance in, letting things go sometimes and just waiting it out.
Okay, and you mentioned about, trying to find a teacher and searching for knowledge, but what about, for the person that he just wants to just get back into praying and, just sort of having an easygoing Islamic life, but he is not interested in searching knowledge and having a teacher and really getting into it that way. Is this something that is possible too?
Well, the thing is, like, my personal opinion on religion, and a lot of people might disagree with this, is that there's many different stages. There's many different, points that people will reach in their life. And I think it's kind of just okay, to be where you are. At the end of the day, even in the Quran and in Hadith, it talks about people who pray 5 times a day and do all of these things, but there's nothing inside. They're just completely hollow and empty. And, our goal is not to be those types of people, but to actually be people who have meaning and understanding in our life. If you decide to be that type of person, obviously I don't, I think everyone has their own personal choice and they can be whatever they want to be. But, you know, personally for me, I want to be a person who has meaning. So I will say, like, I still struggle with prayer. I still, you know, only 2 or 3 years ago did I really start learning to fast in Ramadan. And I had moments where I was just fasting and praying, but I didn't feel anything. And then, you know, at one point, I just completely left, you know, doing prayer and fasting. And this was actually in my 20s. And, you know, it was kind of a nice experience in some way, I'll say, because it gave me some time and some room to really understand why those things were important to my life. And to really, you know, understand and see it from a different perspective. I never closed myself off, and I think it's really important for me to say that. I didn't close myself off and say, oh, prayer and fasting are not important at all, and I should never do them again. I always had the intention I wanted to do it again. But I was also like, you know what, I think I'm just exhausted from praying 5 times a day and feeling like it doesn't mean anything to me. So at that point, I did leave for a while. I tried to ask and question and really, you know, pray to Allah about it as well. And with time, you know, I started feeling that there was a gap, that there was something really missing. And I started to slowly, you know, get back into it. And I would say if you're struggling with 5 prayers, just start with 1. You know, just make sure that you pray the Isha prayer and that you're really committed to that 1 prayer, and start off slowly until you really feel like, hey, this is something that I can, you know, do a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. Because as I said, you're always going to have highs and lows. It's never going to be, oh, like I'm always going to pray 5 times a day and, you know, be this amazing person. You're always going to have a point where you're like, I don't really feel like praying today. But it's important to keep that persistence of, you know, understanding why it's important for your life, or why you should be doing it instead of just abandoning it altogether. So that's what I'll say, if that's the type of person that you are, and that's what you're going through. But yeah, you know, it's really, you know, I think it's really important for our communities to, or the communities that our parents at least grew up in, to really stress that, you know, a lot of the reason, let me just give you this example. A lot of the reason why my father prays 5 times a day is not because he had the spiritual awakening and he decided to do it. It was because he grew up in a household where that's what they did, you know, and they went to the masjid for every prayer, and that's just what you did. So it's more of a habit thing than it is something that he really, you know, feels spiritually connected to. I'm not trying to, you know, say that all his journey is not important, or, you know, oh, everything that he has to offer is not, it's not of, you know, any importance. But what I am saying is that, you know, I have felt, you know, ashamed when I met people who said to me, oh, you don't pray 5 times a day, like, you know, what am I going to get out of you, or what am I going to, you know, I can't take advice from someone like you, or take, you know, your practice seriously. And I found that a lot of those people were people who had made prayer more of a habit through culture, or even just, yeah, maybe their faith was just stronger than mine. But one who's really humble will tell you, you know, it's okay. Just start off slowly, and inshallah, you know, you'll get there. And that's just a part of life, you know. Our life is not about being the perfect being by the time we die. It's about, you know, consistently striving for Allah. And that's emphasized consistently in the Quran, that you're striving. You know, it's not about perfection, and that once you reach that perfection, you're done. It's about this journey towards that, you know, perfection and connection to Allah. So I think I should really emphasize that. And even prayer, you know, it's not about, you know, I pray 5 times a day so that I don't go to hell or something. It's about, I pray 5 times a day because that's what we need as human beings. We need that time of connection to Allah. And, you know, that's we should see it as something that's beneficial for us rather than something that's a duty.
Yeah, I think a problem for a lot of people when they're trying to think about accepting Islam is that they think that there's so much to do, and how am I ever going to do all of these things? How am I going to start praying? How am I going to do all of these things? And so they have this doubt, and this is what stops them.
Yeah, and I think that it is a community issue too, where people are kind of bashing each other. And even when I went to, for example, when I was going to the masjid as a child, I would just hear people talking and gossiping about other people. There was the consistent debate of, should a woman wear a niqab? Should she do this? Should women be praying behind men? Whatever typical issues you would hear in these, mosques. And when I grew up, I just realized that it was just because for a lot of the people who were specifically going to that mosque when I was a child, Islam was not something that they felt uh, personally connected to, because a lot of the people who were at that mosque that I knew, they were all from immigrant families, and the parents were just like, we grew up praying 5 times a day and you guys can't even pray once or whatever, but they couldn't understand how disconnected we felt as young people to prayer, also with our our lifestyle of going to school, going to work, everything, and not having that break. And that the reality is each culture has their own preference. So I think Americans or Westerners generally, they look for meaning, they look for something deeper. And I think for other cultures there's kind of a for example, Japanese culture is all about tradition. It's about what the society all should be doing with the duties that they have. And you have to understand that every culture has its own perspective on how they view different issues. So it's important to respect their end where they just felt like, prayer is a duty. And that's fine if you feel that way. But, for us, it wasn't like that. We were more on the end of like, I need to know why I should do it.
Okay, and you've mentioned spirituality a few times now. So, and you talked about how, there's people that do the prayer and they're only doing it out of habit, and, there's no real connection of their heart with the one they're praying to. So can you tell us a little bit more about this spirituality that you mentioned? And, because this is probably the thing that most of our listeners are trying to find is, how do I get that connection with God?
So, I think the first thing that I should say is that throughout my own understanding of religions as a whole, I really do believe that, you can be, you could be somehow Buddhist and still somehow in some way be a Muslim in some kind of way, because you're maybe I should explain it in this way. When I was reading the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, one of the things that really affected me was that, I thought about how, so the story is he was looking at the sky and he said, the moon, like this must be God. And then he looked at the sun and he said, this must be God. And then, and then in the end, he realized that God was something he could not see. And I think what really appealed to me, because this was one of the questions I had for many years as well, is like, how would someone who has never come across Islam how would they ever become Muslim? How could they ever gain, entrance into Jannah and, be a part of this religion that is the only religion that's correct. And what I found with time was that, there's always going to be people out there who don't have any interaction with Islam. There always will be that. And I think, for people who say you have to be this religion um, to be on the path to God, I really do have a lot of issues with that statement, because I feel like, when we read these stories about prophets, we don't find that a missionary came to them and was like, hey, you should be Muslim. It really started off as their own, inquisitive nature of trying to understand why Allah their life was the way it was, or why, who was ruling over the earth, and where everything came from. And I think that opened the door for Allah to reach out to them and say, okay, this is my religion, this is the path, this is the deen. And I have met a lot of people. I know a brother who is Christian, and it's really interesting to me that he has so many habits that are mentioned in, not habits, but he has a lot of opinions, and he does things a certain way. And I'm always interested because I see them and I'm like, it's interesting because Islam talks about, this is the way we should do this, or this is the way we should do that. And he was like, oh, interesting. Like, I never knew that, because he's never met any Muslims before, and I was the first Muslim he ever met. And so, even as a Christian, he's been really searching for God and really searching for a pathway. And I think that sincerity and honesty has led him so far in his life that I can truly say that this is a brother that I feel like is better than a lot of Muslims that I even knew. And he really is a brother to me, and always there to help where I need it. So I do feel like spirituality is something that comes from the heart. It comes from your connection and from your inquisitive nature to ask about life and to ask about God. And some people will eventually, accept Islam, and that's wonderful. Islam does have a lot of things to offer, but some people just will not ever, accept it. And you know what, like, at least for me, in my opinion, that's also really okay. Because if we remember, if we, look back, we as Muslims are supposed to recognize that Judaism and Islam, Judaism and Christianity were once, a part of Islam, that it started off with Judaism, then Christianity, then Islam. And so we are, there is this kinship and connection between us and them. And they are a part of us, and we are a part of them. And just recently, I've, been really focusing in on more of Buddhism and Hinduism, and trying to understand those religions as well. And I'm finding that there's so many connections to Islam and those religions as well. So the reality is that all of these religions, they all had one goal in mind, which was to find God, to build this connection with God. And it's quite interesting when you start searching deeper and deeper that you find how much the cultural need of that society is what shaped the understanding of the religions of those areas. So even when we look at Arabs, Islam came down a certain way because it was trying to fulfill this the gaps of that society. And that's why I said to you that, cultural identity plays a big role into religion. It really does. My point right now is not to say that, you should go out there and just, convert to any religion you want. You should be the religion that, with full honesty, you should be the religion that you really want to be, and that you really feel connected to. But obviously for me, Islam was something that really I connected with, and I found so much peace in. And if someone else feels that they can't find that peace, it's okay, as long as they have their connection with God and they're consistently searching, as I'm still consistently searching as well. As a Muslim, I'm still consistently searching, within this religion. But as far as finding spirituality, I would just say it starts off with, number one, being with good people, being with people who can offer you a lot too, because you need to be with people who have different opinions and different they can offer you different perspectives as well. Sometimes that's also necessary, but also, taking the time to really reflect on things on your own. If you don't do prayer, at least you should, take the time to reflect and meditate and try to take that time to really think about things. And also, as I mentioned, really dua is so powerful. And if you just spend 5 minutes a night to just pray to Allah and just consistently ask Allah, be like, Allah, I want to be closer to you. Please, facilitate that in some way. I truly believe that works, you know. And that's what I can basically say. Different people have different things that will lead to spirituality. For me, it's nature. I love being in nature. Nature what reminds me of Allah. For some people, it's the people that they're surrounded with. It's their friends who really push them to be a more spiritual person. And sometimes for other people, it's seeking out knowledge to figure out what does it for you. And just also through simple acts. So simple acts of gratitude throughout the day really build a higher level of spirituality. And also consistently reminding yourself that your life is not just here. You have a life that's going to come later as well, and to disconnect from the problems of this world. So I'm not saying let people, take advantage of you or don't fix problems or don't, do anything in this world. But what I am saying is that there's the moments where we really caught up with what's around us. And it's important to just sometimes disconnect and say, you know what, like I trust, I need to really look at my life right now from a different perspective and really just let this go and let Allah handle it. And I think that really does build a lot of faith in spirituality when you say, you know what, I recognize I don't have control right now.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nawal. That's great. I really like your advice there at the end on spirituality. And also, your story is quite amazing as well, because you're still young, you're only 29, and so you've still got a lot of years in front of you, but you seem to have gathered a whole lot of wisdom through all of your trials, everything. And I'm sure you didn't even tell us all of your problems you had. You told us a few, but you probably held back as well. And I can feel that all of these things that happen in your life have made you the person that you are now. You're a very positive person, and you've got a lot of knowledge and wisdom, and it's going to help you now into your latter ages.
Inshallah, I hope so. I mean, I'm nowhere where I want to be, but I'm definitely trying. And, as I'm nearing 30 next year, inshallah, I do sense that there's a lot of changes happening even now and perspectives that are changing. But one thing I will say, before we leave is that, really try to be the best person you can be. I live in a country right now where there's not so many Muslims, or at least I should say that even if there are Muslims, the minority that lives here, they're not very religious Muslims and they don't know anything of Islam. And I've come across Muslims who told me things like, well, Islam pushes to do this or to do that. And I was really shocked because as people who are Muslims, I would expect them to know that's not true. And with time, I began to realize that not everyone has a positive opinion of Islam because of, whatever it may be. So here it's due to, the culture of the region, but also due to the political situation, that people here were not really able to, even as Muslims, connect to anything related to Islam. And so they feel very disconnected from it. But I really do try my best to present something very positive and to always present my opinions as my opinions. Because even though I feel strongly about certain things, but as I said, Islam is vast and it has many opinions to accommodate to different people. So it's really important to talk about things as your opinion, but also explaining that Islam has many other perspectives as well, and that they need to find what's right for them. So that is really something that I stress to do. And with people who are wanting to convert, just take your time to do things step by step. Don't overload yourself and you know, after you become Muslim, well, I'm going to pray 5 times a day. I'm going to wake up for tahajjud. I'm going to read Quran all the time. Those are all really wonderful things, but you can also get burnt out. And our faith emphasizes, even the Prophet ﷺ emphasized that, you know, there was the story of the man who came and said, you know, I don't marry and all I do is pray all the time. And he said, that's wrong. Like, you should get married and you should also have time for your family and for other things as well. And we need a balance. You know, life is all about balance. You need to have balance in everything, and you're going to consistently be changing your mind and your perspective on things, and that's okay. You don't have to be a complete person when you're 20 or 30 or even 50. You know, there's going to be changes, and you have to really accept it and investigate and be open to that. So that's what I would like to say. And you know, the other thing is, like, always remember to do the right thing, you know, because even when things are negative, and I've had my share of negative things, I mean, really awful things, but, you know, I always really trusted Allah. And I always, even when I wasn't Muslim, I always said, you know, God, I trust that all these horrible things that happen, they happen for a reason. And I'm not happy about them, but I, you know, and I really struggled with justice for many years, of the concept of justice, and how Allah can be just and let horrible things happen to people. But, you know, I also made my peace with it over the years. And I recognize how important it is to always do the right thing to break those cycles. You know, so to have a bad experience with a Muslim, and let them define that, you know, let it be just one incident and be like, I'm going to break that cycle of whatever negativity I'm seeing in front of me. So pretty much I have to say that. The only other last thing that comes to mind is don't be afraid to make mistakes, because I think we also do come from a culture of perfection, or I mean, the Muslim communities, I think they really do emphasize that we have to be perfect, but you know, you're gonna have mistakes you're gonna make on the way, and it's okay. You just have to accept it for what it is and just say, okay, it was a bump in the road, but I've learned from it. And I had a really amazing story. I had a sister who's a friend of mine, and for many years, her mother was a convert, and for many years, she didn't accept Islam. She was really just against it. She was not interested at all. And she got pregnant by her boyfriend. And when she went to her mother, she was telling me that she was really afraid her mother was going to yell at her and tell her, you know, how horrible, you know, of a person she is, and how, you know, that, you know, she could never accept her again, and she was, you know, going to get kicked out of the house or whatever. And she was really young. She was 16 at that time. And she told me, when I went to my mother just said, Alhamdulillah. She just said, Alhamdulillah, you know, I, inshallah, like, you know, well, I hope that there's khair in this. And, you know, we will always be there for you, and we love you. And that's it. That's all she said. And she said that one, you know, just those couple of sentences completely changed her perspective on Islam. And she has, mashallah, now 2 really beautiful children, and she changed her whole life. But she told me, you know, it took that mistake for me to open my eyes to Allah. So, you know, even in mistakes, there's some kind of sometimes blessing in it. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, or don't, you know, beat yourself too much about it. Just try to find the door to Allah, because I think that's also a problem with some people, is like they'll say, oh, I drink, or I did this sin or that sin, I can never be religious again. But understand that maybe there is some hikmah in that, and that there's always a way to get back.
Okay,
I
great.
hope that's all we know.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, you did a good job. So you mentioned earlier that you learnt Quran and Islamic studies. Do you do any teaching these days?
No, I actually don't. I don't. For some time, I was teaching Quran, and I did a year of dawah in university, but due to where I am right now, I don't really have that opportunity.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. The reason why I asked is that maybe if any of our listeners had any questions for you, maybe we could pass them on to you somehow.
Yeah, that would be completely fine. I would be happy to answer your questions or talk to you about something. As I said, I'm not a scholar. I'm not a scholar. I mean, besides just going to Islamic school and Sunday school as a kid, I just did a year of university and just a tajweed degree. So I don't, you know, I'm not like a scholar or anything, but I would love to help if I can in any way.
Sure. If anyone's got any questions, I'll put Nawal's contact details into the show notes, and then hopefully you can connect up with her there.
Inshallah, no problem.
Okay, Nawal. So thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing your story. It was a really interesting story. I enjoyed it.
No problem. Jazakallah khairan for having me.
Yes, you're very welcome. So may the peace and blessings of God be upon you and also onto all our listeners out there. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.